Well, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited for your interview today.
Good morning. It's so exciting to be here.
Good. So I'd like to I just jump in because
Okay,
it's 20 minutes and we just want to get to the good stuff. So in just a few sentences, tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
great. So my name is Justine Leach, and I am a speaker and maternal health advocate. I am a childbirth educator. I work with couples to help them prepare for having babies. And I also train providers in trauma-informed care so that we can make sure that we're supporting people with trauma through the birthing experience.
And that trauma-informed care, I'm so excited for you to be sharing more about this
Mm.
because I think it's really important and I love what you're doing. So, what's your intention with sharing your story today?
Well, I think that culturally we don't have any stories really around the kind of difficult things that we carry with us into childbirth. And so there isn't really a lot of knowledge of the fact that trauma can impact birth and parenting. And so really I want to raise awareness that this is something that can happen, but that there's also help out there for people so that they can have safe and powerful birthing experiences.
Great, great. So tell tell me and tell the audience a bit about how you got involved in all this.
So I think many people in the kind of birthing world, my journey kind of started with the birth of my two children. Um, but at the time that I was having my children, I was actually in a completely different career. So my career was as an academic, and with my first, um, I was writing up my PhD, and so I was pregnant with my first baby, writing up my PhD, and I really thought that that was going to be the journey that I was going to take. My PhD was on sexual violence and sexual consent. And as most people who have had or done a PhD in something maybe other than the sciences, there's a personal story behind the selection of that topic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and mine was my own experience of rape as a teenager. Um, so I was writing this PhD and I was pregnant and preparing for birth. And I felt like I had a pretty good handle on how trauma might impact my birthing experience. But unfortunately, what happened in that first birth was actually quite traumatic. And that was primarily because although I had done a lot of work to prepare, my providers were not really very trauma informed. And a number of things happened in that birth that had a very negative impact on me going forward in my parenting journey.
Right. We talked a little bit about how, and I felt this way when I was pregnant as well, that you
Mm.
almost just become this carrier and you just
Right,
do what you're told because
right,
you've never been through it before. So you
right.
just trust the professionals around you. And I can understand how someone who's experienced trauma, that kind of gives us reminders of that lack of consent.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That lack of consent, lack of control being taken out of your hands. So for me, I had a vaginal exam that I asked to stop, and my provider did not stop that vaginal exam. I had a lot of perineal stretching towards the end of my labor that I did not consent to, and nobody had a conversation with me around. And that I felt very, um, very much like I did not want them to keep on doing that to my body, but I didn't know how to use my voice at the time to ask them to stop. All I could say was pressure. And in response to that, my midwife would say, "Yes, the baby's coming." And I would say, "Pressure," because what I really meant was the pressure of your hands is too much for me. I want them
Hmm.
out. But I couldn't get that sentence out in that time.
Right.
And so I came away from that experience really feeling like I had been re-traumatized, that things had happened that were out of my control, that my consent had not been taken seriously by my providers, even though I had actually disclosed to them that I was a survivor. And I also had a 3rd-degree tear, and that tear was very triggering for me. And I felt a lot of just a lack of support around having had a serious tear. The maternity system in the US, it's very much like, okay, we'll see you in 6 weeks. Bye. Thanks. And you can kind of feel abandoned after you've had a baby, especially if you have had a more significant injury at the time.
Yeah. And so from there, you kind of took what you were doing with your PhD and blended it with this experience.
Right. So I finished up my PhD, and I actually was pregnant with my second when I defended that PhD, and I graduated 6 weeks after my second was born. And I had an extremely positive experience with my second. I had hired a very experienced doula who really just helped me regain control over what was going to happen. And I felt incredibly safe and very held through that experience. And that's despite the fact that we were actually pushing in the car on the way to the hospital. But a few months after that, I think my second was about 7 months old, my doula contacted me saying that they were looking for somebody to speak at a conference on the experience of giving birth as a trauma survivor. And this conference was being held in a local hospital. It was going to be an audience of nurses, midwives, doulas, mental health professionals, maybe some doctors, although doctors don't often come to these things, unfortunately. And so I went, and I felt very privileged to be able to offer my story. And by offering my story, I was also able, as you say, to blend my knowledge of trauma and my kind of academic work on consent and sexual violence with my own personal story and history and what had happened to me. And I had this experience, I gave only a 10-minute, 15-minute speech. And I had this experience of a midwife coming up to me afterwards, and she was crying. She had tears streaming down her face. And she said to me that she had learned more in the last hour. I had been on a panel, so there had been 3 of us speaking. She said that she'd learned more in the last hour than she'd learned in her whole midwifery training. And that she was going to change how she practiced midwifery. And I was just like, wow.
Yeah. That's when you want to make an impact and you hear it and you get that immediate feedback.
Yeah.
That feels pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, like when the universe says something like this to you, what do you do? Do you step into it, or do you hide? And I was it was actually beautiful timing, because I'd finished my PhD and I was between that and finding an academic job. And I just thought, no, I don't want to follow that path. That is not my path. This is the path. How do I be that voice so that I can change the practice of more than just one midwife? Because that impact is so huge. Like, she will touch so many women's lives over the course of her career. She was a young, she looked like she was in her late 20s, early 30s. She was a young midwife. She has a lot of career left. And I was like, she is going to make such a huge impact. And if I can reach more people like her, then I can have a phenomenal impact. So I was like, what do I do? And I had been in school for 10 years. Well, longer than 10 years. My PhD took me 10 years. So I'd been in school forever. And I was like, well, I can't go back to school. That's like, that's just too much school. But I was like, okay, so I retrained as a childbirth educator, which I managed to do within 6 months, and became certified. I created a curriculum designed for trauma survivors, so that we ourselves, when I teach this curriculum, and I have a co-teacher that I teach alongside who's a mental health counselor, we do all the work to make sure that we're holding space for our couples, that we welcome experiences and challenges and difficult feelings into the room. And we really work to make it a very safe space for learning about how to give birth to babies. So I did that, and then we are also developing programs for doulas and midwives, nurses and physicians, so that they can learn how to look after survivors in the perinatal period, from pregnancy through postpartum. And it's just been such a fantastic journey.
Yeah.
Very
And are you
exciting.
doing this locally, or what are your plans with it? How will it grow?
So we are doing local in-person work. So we have our childbirth classes at the moment are in person in the Boston area. We do workshops for providers and for hospitals, and we will travel for those. Those are also in person, but we will travel. And then in addition to that, we have an online course for birth workers that people can take from the comfort of their own home. And that's a 6-week program in supporting people giving birth through a trauma-informed lens.
Very nice. I'm super excited for you because I think this is so important, and I feel like you're really the leader in this area, and I'm excited to see the changes that can happen from this, because as women we're making good progress, but there's still a lot of things that just seem kind of archaic that are still happening. Women have been giving birth for a really long time. And it would be great to have some additional resources that really treat us more as human beings and less like, animals. So
Right.
lovely.
Or like cogs in a machine, that supposedly all fit the same, and we don't. And that's one of the things that is really important about trauma, is that everyone has had a different experience, and we hold it differently in our bodies, and we respond to triggers differently, and the triggers might be different. And one person might be absolutely terrified of an epidural and know for certain that it would be very, very challenging to be without being able to sort of escape, right? And another person will find the sensation of the contractions incredibly triggering, and actually that epidural is a beautiful gift that helps them through their labor process in a way that is safe and whole. And so just like acknowledging that when we're weighing up, do I have an epidural or do I not have an epidural? We're not just coming to that from a perspective of like, what are the medical risks and what are the benefits? We're also coming from the perspective of who we are and what we know about ourselves. And if we can help parents understand that, but in some ways, just as importantly, if we can help providers understand that, so that when they're having conversations with people around what they want or suggested interventions, that they're really taking into account who that person is, what their own knowledge of their own experience is, and what they know to be safe for themselves. I think that this is really key, because at the moment, we're not really thinking like this in the medical system at all.
Correct. And I feel like there's a lot of shifts happening in the medical community because more people are being self-advocates, more people are asking for additional options, more people are looking at
Mm-hmm.
pharmaceuticals and natural remedies. There's just so many things that are being taken into consideration now that weren't before. And I think that that's a positive change. So I appreciate so much the impact that you're making and the changes that are just going to ripple out from what you're doing. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
What is your biggest takeaway from this experience?
I think so. I have a personal takeaway from my own life, which is that when I thought, and I thought for many years that I was failing in my PhD and that it was all going horribly and it was a terrible mistake. When I thought all those things, I didn't appreciate how the journey that was going to take me from that first trauma that I experienced through learning about it in a kind of like academic brain would kind of take me in a circle back to my own heart and wholeness and journey, and that I would be able to integrate my story with my academic work, with my love of teaching, with my experience just as a human being, my desire to be connected with others, and that entire journey would add up to where I am now. And I just find that a really whole place to be working from. So that's my personal takeaway. My takeaway that I hope others have from listening to this is just to kind of recognize that we all carry difficult stories with us through our lives. And it might not be a story of sexual trauma, it might be a car crash or an experience of loss. But we carry these stories with us, and we bring them into our parenting journeys. And so what I hope for you is that you just start to think about, how do I want to hold this as I become a parent, and what supports maybe do I need to put in place so that I can walk this path as safely and joyfully and powerfully as possible.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. There's a lot to chew on in that. Like, if nobody hears anything but the takeaways, I think they would be, they'd get great value out of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to say before I ask you my fun question?
I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to share. It's really just, every one of these opportunities to connect and share and speak from the heart, I think really brings the world together. And so thank you.
I agree. I think there's so many different perspectives out there. And if we only stay in our own circles, we'll never get to experience those new perspectives. Yeah. And, I have adult children now. So to me, I'm not going to interact with a doula again, unless for some reason my daughters, decide that they want me as part of their birthing process. If they ever have children, I don't know. So I love your perspective, because I can reflect back on my own experiences and just see the value that's going to be there for my daughters, or other people I love that are going to go through the birthing process with or without trauma, to just know that that's an additional resource in their world is fantastic. So thank you again.
Thank you. Stay tuned. I have big plans. I have plans for a book, and I also have plans for a big website that's going to be a huge resource for parents.
Very good. Well, we'll put your contact information in the video notes, and anything new that you do, just let me know, and we'll add it into the notes.
Oh, that's exciting. Thank you.
So we want to give you whatever support we can to really grow what you're doing. So thank you
so much. Thank
All
you.
right. So I always end with a fun question because some of the conversations that I have with guests can be kind of heavy and we want to
Mm.
just lighten it up and have fun. Plus, it brings a big smile to our face, which maybe will show up in the thumbnail for the video rather than that face of. Okay, the question I want to ask you today is, what is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh.
And if you don't eat ice cream, your favorite dessert would work.
So my favorite ice cream flavor is mint choc chip, but the mint choc chip from Whole Foods, the three is it 365 brand or three,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, the brand, their own brand.
Yeah,
It's
their
that
brand.
specific brand, that one.
Nice. Very.
The chocolate chips are so big, right? Like, so they're really satisfying.
Very good. I think I read somewhere that mint chip was one of the most popular ones,
Yeah,
you know,
no,
which surprised me because I don't care for it.
you don't care
But
for it.
that's,
Okay, but you need
yeah,
to try this because
oh,
some of the others, it's not green either, right? It's white
right. I
and
remember that it's white.
it's white and it's like the chocolate chips are big.
Yeah,
And this is like, and it's also not grainy because some of the other ones are grainy.
yeah.
Not a fan of the
Well,
grainy
I might
one.
have to try it and see if that brand converts me. Well, again, thank you so much. Thanks for
Thank you.
joining us. And I'm going to go ahead and close it out. Thank
Okay,
you again.
thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.